Okay, good morning. Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us for today's Counselor Connect session. My name is Amanda Callahan and I am the coordinator for Counselor Connect. Today's session kicks off our Counselor Connect learning for the upcoming 2022-2023 school year. And we couldn't be more excited for what's to come this year, especially in regards to professional learning and all we have planned for professional learning. I will share more about that at the end of our session. About this year's calendar. I'll give you a very high level overview, but for now, I'd love to introduce our session for today. Also, just as a quick reminder, this session, along with all of our other monthly sessions, are recorded and are then made available on demand for viewing at any time. I am thrilled to welcome our presenter for this session, which is Building Trust and Creating Connection. Joining us today is Tiffany Krieger. She is a licensed social worker and social emotional learning and school culture specialist with Encompassing Education. Tiffany, I'm so glad you're with us to share this very timely topic as we prepare to welcome students back for a new school year. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you to get this session started.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me, and welcome to those who are here live, and welcome to those who are watching this later when we send out this webinar. I'm glad to see all of you, and I'm excited. Oh, sorry, I was supposed to click that. Here we go. I'm excited to talk to you today about how we can build trust and create connection with our students, and to understand a little bit about why that is so important. I think we know intuitively that that's something that we need to be doing, but it's nice to have the science and the facts behind it to back us up. So my goal for our hour today is just to leave you with some really concrete ideas that you can take with you right into the classroom, to build these relationships, to understand how we gain the trust of not even just our students, but the other students in the building, and how those connections can really help make our school climate just feel better and safer for all that come in and out of our building. And so let's see, I should mention that I've worked as a therapist as well. And this is what I would spend the bulk of my time doing. So I would have these 1-hour sessions with these kids and I worked with all ages from 3 to adults. And I would spend so much of my time in those first sessions just really building relationships, and treatment doesn't work without it, right? If we don't have that solid foundation. And that's true for a classroom as well. So for myself, I like to just start each session with a big deep breath, just to bring us into this space, welcome everybody, and invite you to give yourself this hour to be as present as possible. I know we have a lot going on. So if you would like to join me, you may. If not, that's okay too. I'm just going to close my eyes for just a minute. I'm going to take some big deep breaths in through my nose and out through my mouth. Another one in through the nose and out through the mouth. And my next exhale, I'm going to let any distractions just sort of melt away, and trust that they will all be there waiting for me when we're done here today. Take one more big deep breath. And when you're ready, open your eyes and join me in this space. All right, thank you. You'll notice my rate of speech slows down after that. So I really do that for myself as much as I do for everybody else. And we'll talk about exactly what we're doing in just a moment. All right. So why is this discussion important, right? We know it intuitively, but why are we here today? So the research shows that just one positive adult relationship can positively impact the lives of a child that has multiple ACEs, or adverse childhood experiences, right? We know that having multiple adverse childhood experiences can put us at risk for negative health outcomes, negative mental health outcomes in the future. The exciting part about that research, about the ACEs research and research like it, is that one of the best protective factors is just one positive relationship with an adult. So it really is powerful enough to negate a lot of the negative stuff that so many of us have experienced. And children and adolescents who have a mentor-like relationship with someone out of their home are less likely to have those externalizing behavioral problems. So when we see those outbursts or throwing of things, yelling, that's, outward behavior, or those internalizing problems. And those are sometimes missed. Those kids who have their hoods up and maybe are sleeping during class or don't seem to be engaging, things like that. So we see less of both these types of disengagement when we have a positive relationship with the student, or when they have a positive relationship with just one adult in the building that they know and will encourage them and allow them to feel safe in learning and making mistakes and all of that. They're more likely to complete the tasks that they start, remain calm in the face of challenges, show interest in learning new things, and be engaged in school. And even to talk to their parents or their trusted adult about things that matter. I'm going to click those. Sorry. So while a lot of our students or a lot of kids have this relationship in the home, it's really important for us to understand that it doesn't have to be someone at home. So it can be us. So when we have those kids that feel like they don't have the support at home, we can still be the one to make that difference. So it matters. What we do matters. All right. So why? Why are we talking about this? We're going to look at this through applied educational neuroscience and the polyvagal theory, just so you kind of understand that there is a scientific background here. And we're going to be looking at the physiological stress response and how it influences behavior and how that's going to affect the way we build relationships. So when we talk about the polyvagal theory by Stephen Porges, I think, am I saying that right, Amanda? I think so. So he tells us that not only does the body remember a traumatic experience, but it can actually get stuck in that trauma response mode. And when we are working with students or children, they might not even have the actual memory of the trauma, right? This is just their body's response system at this point. They're stuck in that time, okay? Because the traumatic event doesn't have a timeline. You can't always understand when it happened. So when the threat is gone, right, then that body is still receiving or perceiving danger, and its defenses stay engaged. So this can be true for chronic stress as well, which is really important for us to understand in these times, as we have all endured quite a bit of chronic collective stress and grief over the past few years, while we've also, and our students also, are carrying in the additional individual lived experiences of stress, trauma, disconnect, and more. And so the reason I say all this is so that we understand that connection and trust develop in a regulated brain state, okay? So we have to be able to make or to let our students know that they're safe. We want to give them their brain those cues to let them know that they're safe. And we can do that by co-regulating. That's the deep breath at the beginning of this session. I'm regulating myself. And by doing that, you may be doing it with me. If you ever, when you have like babies and you hold them up to you and you start, and they start to settle, right? You're close, you have that. It's the same thing. We're co-regulating. We're teaching our brains how to be calm together and teaching that awareness. It isn't always about being calm. My younger daughter, in fact, had said to me, because this was a mistake I made early on, she'd be like, you always want me to be calm. You always want me to be calm. And I'm like, oh no, I'm teaching her that her big emotions aren't okay. That was never my intent, right? I just want you to be aware of when you're dysregulated or aware of when maybe you're feeling unsafe, so we can have that connection. And it's important for us to recognize it in ourselves as well. So I'm going to do a super fast rundown just of the stress response system so that we can understand it and be able to recognize it in ourselves and others when we move into these strategies. Okay, so this is my quick little spiel, and then we'll dive right into what we can do. So what happens to our body when we're under stress, right? There are two main branches of our threat appraisal system. There's the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. And in a healthy state, these two systems support each other really beautifully. They work in concert. It's actually a very amazing thing. We see it in animals as well, which we'll talk about in a minute. But in situations that require action, so there's the presence of a threat, whether that's a real threat or a perceived threat, then that sympathetic nervous system is activated. Okay, so it's much like when you press the accelerator on a car; it's just activated very quickly. It's not your slow and steady rise. It's going to happen very fast, and it's going to mobilize the body's resources to respond to the demand. So the good old bear in the woods example, you're walking through the woods, you come face to face with a bear, and that gas pedal or that sympathetic nervous system is going to be immediately engaged. Your body's going to be ready to either fight or flee or freeze. Okay. So your pupils are going to dilate so you can just have kind of tunnel vision in on the threat, so you can see it better. Your heart rate, your blood pressure are going to increase. You might begin sweating. I know that's a response for me, a stress response for me. Your digestion is no longer going to be a priority, so that's going to slow down. Immunity is going to slow down. You don't need those things in that moment. And your blood is going to rush away from the skin and the extremities to the large muscle groups to prepare you to act in this moment of threat. And then when we've escaped the bear, or the emergency is over, then the brakes are engaged. Our body starts to, recognize that it's safe, and we activate that parasympathetic nervous system, or our rest and digest, our calming system. Okay. So this is when, our vision's going to come back to the way it was. That dry mouth might go away. We're going to have that decreased heart rate. We're going to kind of return to normal. And we see animals instigate this, right? Instigate their parasympathetic nervous system by, what do they do after they have a threat? You watch your dog get in a little tussle. It's an example from this morning at my house, and go back into the yard. And the first thing he does is he shakes, right? He's literally shaking those stress hormones out of his body, engaging that parasympathetic nervous system. So it's natural. The thing that humans have is that we have that cognitive brain where we're not overthinking it, but we're putting a lot more meaning to it, right? But that animal instinct is just to shake it off and engage that parasympathetic nervous system. So what happens though, and why this conversation is important and relevant to what we're talking about today, is if there's been a trauma, or if there have been stress levels that have been high or sustained over time, then we begin to experience long-term physiological changes. Okay, so no matter the cause, even if it's a positive stress that we've had over time. So we can have positive stress, like planning a wedding or having a baby, being a parent, right? Those kinds of things. If we aren't regulated, if we aren't aware and working on our regulatory system throughout, and we stay in that chronic stress mode, we have that gas pedal stuck on, right? And that's going to lead to high blood pressure, which can contribute to heart disease or stroke. We might see in our students who are going to be more reactive, right? We're not going to think, we're going to just respond. We're going to react rather than respond. And it can lead to a bunch of other things as well. Decreased immune function, inflammation throughout the body, all kinds of things that we don't want. So there is good news though. And the good news is that this cycle can be broken, and that we can empower ourselves and our students to do that. And that's going to open us up for better health outcomes, as well as better relationships. And that relational safety is the foundation of all of this. Okay. So that was a super quick overview. And this is just another view of kind of the brain and how it looks different when it is stressed versus unstressed. So you see over there on the stressed brain that we're working from the amygdala, or the emotional response center. And again, that's that reaction rather than that response. And when we are unstressed, or we're able to talk about, process what's going on, then we're ready to learn. We're primed for learning. We're ready to have conversations, to be open and listen to one another. So that was my real super quick stress response system. If you have questions, I don't watch the chat very often. Sorry. Yeah. Right, Bill. Yeah. Far less open to learning and being able to function in a regular manner. Exactly. Which is the point, right? That was my long-winded way of saying just that. Yes. So add questions in as we go. Stop me at any time. We're going to do an activity in just a few minutes, so you won't have to listen to me this whole time. But the importance of recognizing stress in our body is because emotions are contagious. So let's talk about what we can do. So before we even meet our students, before we even walk into the classroom, there are things that we can do to prepare for building trust and creating connection. So, excuse me, the first thing we want to do is recognize our own stress level, right? Before we go in. There's a study done that talks about cortisol levels. And there were teachers who went into a classroom with higher levels of cortisol, which is a stress hormone. And even if they went in and they smiled and they engaged and they did the teacher thing, right? They did their job, they did what they were there to do. The students left with higher levels of cortisol than they had when they went in. So even if we're, trying to engage and fake it, right? Fake it till we make it, that there is still this contagion, this emotional contagion between the adult and the students. But calm is contagious as well. So that again is the good news. So your energy is going to introduce yourself before you even speak. I'm sure you've walked into a room where you can feel it, right? You can feel the tension. The biggest example I have of this for myself is walking into a grocery store like March 13th, whatever that day was that we went on lockdown in 2020. And I just legit needed groceries. I wasn't trying to, I didn't fully understand, right, that what was yet to come. But I walked in that grocery store and I could feel it before I was even through the second double doors. I could feel the tension. I got anxious. Someone walked out. They said, the line is over an hour, like go home. So I did. I stopped at CVS. I got a frozen pizza and I went home. But I could feel that tension. I think we all can relate to that, right? Okay. So aside from checking our own brain state and body state before engaging with our students, we really need to think about our nonverbal communication. And we know these things, right? Tone, volume, body posture, eye contact, facial expressions, mannerisms, proximity, and breath. So I want you to think back to a time maybe when you were disciplined as a child or punished as a child. And what do you generally remember? Do you remember the way what the adult said? Do you remember their tone of voice? Do you remember their posture? My husband's a very tall guy. So if he's standing over my kids, like that can unintentionally be can feel threatening. And I watched my younger ones sort of melt, and even if the tone of voice is calm and level. And me, I definitely bring in the stress levels. My breath increases, things like that. So these are things we really need to be careful about. Hands, I swing my hands around a lot. That can be very threatening to a student. So that's another thing we want to think about. I had an instructional assistant who was like, just hold the side of your pants. And I was like, that's such a good idea. Like when I was a kid and went into the store, my mom's like, don't touch anything, because so certain students that throwing my hands around could be perceived as threatening. So to work through that before we had that trusted relationship. So just things to really be thinking about. All right. And then we're going to we're going to talk about our constructs real quick. So we want to understand the construct of trust and connection. What is it we're trying to do? It's really important, again, to note that both are rooted in that autonomic brain safety that we've been talking about. It requires vulnerability. Brene Brown has really done a beautiful job of breaking down these concepts into through years of studying them. And she has, in her book, The Atlas of the Heart, she has identified trust as choosing to risk making something you value vulnerable to another person's actions. Okay? So it's about really opening yourself up in that vulnerability, and there has to be safety there. Distrust is what is important to me is not safe with this person. So I'm not going to share with you if I don't feel like it's safe. I'm not going to share with you if I feel like it's not going to stay between me and you, right? And then connection is that energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued. Okay, seen, heard, and valued is the biggest takeaway from all of the work that we do. People who feel seen, heard, and valued, and who can give and receive without judgment are going to feel safer. They're going to calm down in your presence. They're good. That just all of that is regulating. All of that builds connection. All of that builds relationship. And we're going to talk about how to do that. Building trust. So here are the 7 elements from Dr. Brown, Brene Brown. And I want you to keep in your mind as we go through. So boundaries, right? You respect my boundaries. And when you're not clear about what's okay and not okay, you ask, you're willing to say no. So that kids and adults thrive with routine, with procedures that make sense, with clear guidelines. Yep. And boundaries are a part of that. So I know what's okay and I know what's not okay. And there's okay to be a little bit of wiggle room. Like there's this like, I can't think of the term, it'll come to me. But at my own house, so we have lots of rules, but safety rules are non-negotiable. Okay. So there's a little bit of freedom, and that's in my classroom as well, in my office, that there's a little bit of freedom. You're going to have some power. I don't completely control you. But safety rules are non-negotiable. Okay. In my office, we're not going to throw scissors. It's happened, right? We're not going to throw chairs. That's the safety rule. If that's been broken, then there's going to be a consequence, right? At home, you're going to wear your helmet, seatbelts, that kind of thing. Now, if I said no ice cream after 7 o'clock, and I don't know, as my youngest will say, can I persuade you though? She may persuade me to do that. We'll see. So reliability, I can count on you. You're going to show up. Okay. I can depend on you being there over and over. Accountability, as adults, we have to learn to apologize and admit our mistakes. I think that happens quite a bit in schools, but not all the time. And so we need to be able to say when we're wrong and really model what that looks like and model moving through that. Rita Pearson does a great job of explaining that in a video. She talks about doing an entire math lesson wrong. And then she came back the next day and she was like, you guys, I taught that completely wrong. I'm so sorry. And she jokes that they were like, but you were so excited. We just let you go. And so, yes, giving some options allows us to better accept the non-negotiables that must be in place. Absolutely, Bill. Absolutely. Choice is going to be a big part of building that relationship, right? Choice is always going to empower our students. Let's see, integrity, non-judgment, and generosity. Okay, so all these things are going to be at the foundation of what we talk about. And one of a great example of modeling this for students or giving them a visual of trust, because they're beyond building trust and relationships with us. When we get into that middle school, that high school age, especially, really, in my experience from 4th grade on, our students are trying to figure out how to have trusting relationships with their friends and when trust is broken and how we navigate our interactions with our friends. So this again comes from Brene Brown, and she talks about like the marble jar we have in the classroom. Where you get it for like positive things that you do, you throw in a marble. And so she talks about marble jar friends. So what does a friend do to earn your trust? And so we talk about that with the kids and we brainstorm, how do our friends earn trust? How do you earn my trust? How do I earn your trust, right? What are trustworthy behaviors? So you can see the list that they kind of came up with there: genuine interest, keeping promises, that kind of thing. And so we deposit those as we grow in our relationship. But what are some things that withdraw from the trust jar, right? So breaking confidence, taking people for granted, and understanding that there may only be a few marble jar friends. So those are the friends that we can go to with everything. And then there's going to be those friends who are maybe just, acquaintances, or we have a good time, but we aren't going to engage in the same way with them. They haven't earned that trust in the same way. So this is a good visual for, I use this with middle school groups. We're talking about friendship. Okay. So now we're going to move into values and why this is important. So we're going to do an activity. So if you could grab a piece of paper and a pen. And then you're going to make 3 columns. So you're going to write very important at the top of one, somewhat important, and not at all important. Okay. So very important, somewhat important, and not important. And I'm going to list, they'll be up here as well, but I'm going to read off 20 different values. And I'd like you to put them in whatever column makes sense for you. Okay. And you're defining these values, however you define them, whatever you think. Okay. Here we go. All right. Honesty. Is that very important to you? Somewhat or not at all? And you can think about this however you want as we do it today, professionally, personally, whatever. Okay. Equality. Very, somewhat, or not at all. Power. Faith. Loyalty. Appearance. Influence. Hope. Humor. Acceptance. Generosity. Change. God. Family. Friendships. Adventure. Money. Humility. Comfort. And then finally, compassion. So once you have your 3 lists, your very, somewhat, or not at all important, I want you to add up the values you have in that first column, that very important. So how many values do you have in there? And if you're willing to share, just throw it in the chat. Just the number. Yeah. 5, 10, 20, 14. Yep. Very important. 7, somewhat 10, not 3. Okay. All right. So if you have more than 10, then I want if you have more than 10, I want you to physically cross off any additional ones, right? So get your list down to 10, but you have to physically cross off those values and get it to your top 10. And once everybody has it to their top 10, then I want you to physically cross off until you get to your top 5. Okay. Nope, just not, sorry, not in each column, just in the very important. Top 5 and very important. Okay, we have our top 5. All right, cross it off till you get to top 2. It is tough. People, when I do this in person, when I get to top 2, people get people get mad. I've had adults throw pens often. Yeah, I let humor go. It's a sad day. When you have your top 2, if you're willing to share them, great. If not, that's okay too. Equality and acceptance. Okay. I get a lot of God and family, faith and family. Yep. And then when I have those, I will jokingly say, take it down to 1, and then I'll have people just flat out refuse, right? Actually, with students I have, and I'll tell you a story in a minute about how I did have it go down to 1. But yeah, so going down to our top 2 and then top 1. Okay, so let's think about this activity for ourselves and how we might use this to engage with our students. So what did you learn about yourself through that? I mean, was that hard? Was it easy? Were there things that were easy to get rid of? I want you to kind of think about that. Now, I know this is going to webinar, so you don't necessarily have to share. So if you're just watching this later, I do want you to think through that, okay? So what did you learn about yourself? Were you surprised at what you let go? What were the hardest values to choose between? Sometimes I hear from people that it was easier to go down to 2 than it was like from 10 to 5, right? So I knew my top 2, but to kind of like to get rid of humor, as Bill said, like that was a tough one. At what point do I do that? Right? Okay. And then I want you to think about how this activity might be helpful in understanding how to connect with your students or with your staff if you're a leader. Okay? Or even with your schools, like as school values. What do we value as a school, and how do we talk about what that looks like? So I'm going to share some real life examples to kind of tell you how I've used it. The first time I used it, well, I was actually observing my boss use it, and it was in an alternative school placement. And there had been some new students brought in, and it just changed the dynamic of the classroom, right? And they were really struggling. So at this time, I was overseeing school-based case management through community mental health. And so we had case managers in this classroom, and they're like, we can't connect with our students. We aren't having any progress. We need help, right? It's constant conflict. So we tried some things. We called in my boss. She came in, she did this activity, and we went through, and the kids did great, middle school age. They go through and they're to their top 2. Okay. And she had them go to their top 1. So she sees this one student who's kind of he's the new to the group, and they're identifying him as the one who's kind of instigated this disruption, but it's the relationship between them all. But he's really sitting there and thinking, what can he get for his top 1? So she goes over, and we kind of go over, and we're like, can we help you? And the ones he was choosing between were power and money. Okay. So we're looking through his life, his dynamics. We were working in an area where there's a lot of gang activity, and that was important in his home. There was, maybe some illegal entrepreneurship going on at home, things like that. And power and money were the things that carried weight in his household, and what was important to him, and what he was striving to have. And so that really gave us a different perspective of, 1, what he values, 2, how we connect with him. So if one of us is trying to connect with him about, feeling regulated or feeling vulnerable or wanting good grades, like that isn't going to be something that works, right? And so eventually down the line, what we did is we looked for opportunities for him to have power. Now, money, that's, look at that differently. But how can you empower you to have control of your own, have agency in your own life, or head up things that in the school, things like that. And Bill, yes, it also lets you know what those around you really need. And so another example with students is adding things that are like Maslow before Bloom, right? You can put on there safety. Do you value safety? Do you food? It can be nourishment. Okay. So there's a whole list of these values that you can create on your own. You can, it's a motivational interviewing technique. You can find it on their website. There's over 100. But you can pick and choose. Brene Brown actually has another set of values that you can just use that. There's a lot of different ways you can engage. And then the other example is just with staff. So I did this activity with a school, with a group of school leaders, in a district up north. And one of the principals, he was the middle school principal, he was having a really tough time with calling and doing contact tracing and that type of thing, right? Like he was having a hard time with it. He was resisting it. He was mad about it. Ending sports, like I think they had a whole football team that was out for a bit during like 2020, 2021. And when he did this, we must have had a different list, or maybe he added his own, because he said one of his top 2 was freedom. And so we talked about how, okay, so you're having this moral conflict now with what you view as taking freedom away from students and family, right? And so, but then the superintendent was in the call. And then she and he had this beautiful conversation about just looking at this action of contact tracing and telling kids, they had to quarantine, as looking at it through a public safety lens and what they have to do, but honoring his value and saying that's all of our goal too. We want to come back to that. And how can we offer freedom in a different way? But it was really powerful to watch. And it just came from this act. I mean, I didn't do anything but lead this activity, but it was very interesting. So it's great to do. I've done this, my poor husband, I've done this on a Friday night. And we learned that one of his top 2 values was adventure. And that was on mine, not at all important. And I was like, well, that makes sense when we talk about our weekend plans, what you want to do and what I want to do, but it's a great way to start to, 1, let them know you care about what they value. 2, connect to them in that way, right? And understand when there's a difference, that it may not be personal at all. It's about what we hold true to us and what we need in our lives, right? Okay. Yeah. Yes. And to connect students with other students. Absolutely. It's a great point. And it's good when you do it in a school, you can do it a couple times a year. With adults, I find we pretty much know ours, they're going to stay probably the same, but beginning of year to end of year, that could change with our kids. Friendship might be a big one at some point. We're going to see that change. So it's just a helpful way to start that connection, a great kind of first, second week activity. So do you guys have questions before I move to the next thing? Okay. Told Amanda, I do this in an hour and a half, so I cut about a lot of things, but now I'm like, don't think I cut enough. So don't worry, everything's going to be covered, but and we will leave on time. So the next thing I want to talk about is creating that psychological safety. And psychological safety, that phrase sometimes scares people away, but it simply is just creating that space where people can be seen, felt, and heard. Okay, that's all it means. Where it's safe to make mistakes, it's safe to talk about what's going on. So routine is so important because trust is built in the repetitive patterned experiences. So when I can predict what's next, then I'm going, my brain is going to feel safer, and I'm going to be able to trust the process. That was one of the first things that I think a lot of us lost early pandemic was routine, and finding new routines was stressful to the adults and the students at home. All of it was very stressful. Getting out of that predictable pattern was traumatic. Having a designated space for people to regulate, right? We have big feelings. That's okay. It's not okay to hurt people, right? Here's our, when we have our what's okay, what's not okay, our clear boundaries. So where's a space where I can go and safely let myself calm down? So that can be a space in a classroom. It can be, maybe it's just a person. Maybe you need to go talk to the counselor, maybe, something like that. I know that as a school social worker, our office was often a safe space, right? And we talk about how how we can utilize that. So this is something that's taught. This is how we use it. This is when we use it. And we want to be preventative as often as possible. So as we start to notice patterns, or our students start to notice patterns, then we can identify when a break might be helpful, and we have Bill on here, who's a fantastic math teacher, but I had a lot of students who math was stressful. And if we took a break before math, and then after math, then our students did better during math. So that was something that would come up a lot, or just different specials. For one student, it was music class. So I just know what might be activating for that student and when we can create those breaks, and even if it's just walking to get a drink. All right, touch point. So this is just simply building community. Okay, so building community and points of connection all through the day. And this is as simple as the things that we forget to do or we get too busy to do, just greeting a student by their name. Hey, Amanda, it's great to see you today. That matters, right? Just a quick use of name, quick, how are you? Asking them about something going on in their lives. And we're going to give a strategy for that for the whole school for the beginning of the year. But Bill had signals, so I knew as a teacher what students needed, and we could communicate easily without words. Yes, that is, yep. So I was gonna say too, a hand signal is so good, right? I had a student who would take out like a fidget and set it on their desk, and then the teacher would say, okay, hey, can you run this to Mrs. Krieger's office for me? Can you run this to the, whatever it might be, or do you need to go get a drink? Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. Okay, and then my image here, I didn't have, this was come up later, but you can see it. So we want to reframe too, through this lens of the stress response. And so I know this happens to me, it happens to all of us, where we can start to, view the behaviors as kind of like the red green card for more meat at Fogo de Chao. Exactly like that. Flip it on the table, whichever you need. So as we reframe, we want to start looking at behavior as communication is essentially what this is. And you'll have a copy of this if it's helpful for you in the resources. But, just being able to reframe and understand that they're telling us what they need through their behavior. So the student is so irritating and entitled. I can tell you, I definitely have had that frustration sometimes. And we look, this student needs connection to be seen and heard. What am I missing? Right. So I just this is from Dr. Lori Desautel. She's, you guys all know she's amazing. So she's been very helpful. Her work has been transformative for me. And anchors is the next thing that is from her as well. So just talking at the beginning of the year, as the year goes on, and this is her little activity here, but asking the students and asking the teachers, who are two people that I trust? So then we know, who can we go to? Who can be your people? Are there adults that I trust at this school? When I'm upset, where can I go? Who can I share with? This kind of thing. It can even be a space. Where do I feel safe? Right? I feel safe in sometimes when I'm overstimulated, I want to be in like a tight little space. Like I want to be cozy. Right? So where do you feel safe? With whom do you feel safe? What are some of your interests? And we're going to create these anchors so that we know if there's some dysregulation, if there's some disruption, who can I connect you with that's going to help get us through or get you through, make you feel safe, right? Okay. So that psychological safety, again, is just building that community and that safe space where trust and connection happens naturally. And then the next thing we want to do is intentionally create that connection. So there's a number of ways we can do this. One of my favorites is I noticed statements or kindness letters. So when we say I noticed rather than praise, like you did a great job at this. If we say, hey, I noticed you finished your assignment before the bell rang, you were working really hard, then a student can't argue with that, right? You notice that that's what happened. But if I say, you did a great job today, they might say, no, I didn't feel, I noticed. I noticed statements can be done really quickly on a Post-it note. Hey, I noticed you're working hard, smiley face, and set it on the desk. And these things have big impact. Kindness letters can be just recognizing the kindness in others. You can have your students do this. You can have like a kindness leader for your classroom. I want you to notice kindnesses I want you to notice kindnesses, and I want you to report them to me so that I can give some praise, because I can't see what's going on all the time, right? And Bill reminds us that notice statements are just facts without judgment. Exactly. And so we can give this this praise, so that makes me laugh, but my aunt will say all these wonderful things about us, about her kids. And she'll be like, they're just facts. They're just facts. But it'll be like, she was the best one on stage, just facts. I don't know if that's a fact, but, but yes, but I notice can be very impactful. It's impactful with other staff members too. Just letting people know that you see them. 2 by 10, evidence-based, targeted intervention for those who are tough to engage. So for 2 minutes a day, for 10 consecutive days, you engage with the student and allow them to have a conversation about whatever is of interest to them. I have seen this do some really powerful things. I had a student who came to me in 3rd grade and came every day to my office. And by 5th grade, we were still working like daily. By 5th grade, we were still connected. I was still doing a lot of intervention, is what I'm trying to say. And this teacher was his teacher was having a tough time. She came to me, she was like ready to be done. He had been incredibly unkind. We're not supposed to take it personally, but of course we do. And she agreed to try this 2 by 10. And after that, like my intervention time with him went to weekly, and then it could have been monthly, honestly. Like once he had that connection, once he had that safety, it changed everything for him. And I mean, how silly that for 2 years, I hadn't thought of that with other people in the building, but we know it now, right? Shared journaling. There's a therapist, I don't remember their name, but I just watched this or listen to this podcast, and they said, if my number one strategy for therapeutic practice is journaling, and shared journaling is a way to have teachers be able to respond in a safe space. So I just write a little something and I turn it in, and you can write back. You can have set rules. We aren't going to talk about this. But it's a great thing if you're talking to parents as well. You can do this with a child and a parent. You can write anything in this journal, and you can put it under my pillow, or you can put it on my bedside table, and we'll go back and forth that way. Encourage and invite youth initiated projects. Ask them to do what they want to do, bring their interests to the table, and you're going to create intense connection, and you're going to learn so much about them, and it's going to drive your instruction in a very different way. Warm demander is just a way of reminding us, for those of us who are like me, who do the warm part really well, but not the demander part as well, that creating true connection, those boundaries are important. So the warmth is important, but so is the high expectation, right? I do have high expectations. I want you to be successful, and we need to have both. And like I said, it's a reminder to the Tiffany's out there. And then validation. Anytime we can validate feelings, we're going to help them be seen, and that's going to start that regulatory process as well. So often we unintentionally invalidate, and by saying, "Oh no, you do have friends. Of course you have friends. What are you talking about? I just saw you play with Joey." Whereas instead, if someone came to us and said, "Hey, I don't have any friends," we would just simply say, "That must be really hard," and then we can challenge the thought. Right? Just that simple validation makes a really big difference. Okay. So you're going to there's like a flyer kind of thing from Stand Tall Steve that you will get in the resources. And this is just something that you can do at the beginning of the school year, 7-week challenge to create connection for everybody in the building intentionally. And it's so simple. So he walks you through every step. But essentially what we're doing is we have a challenge each week. So as an example, week 1, I'm going to say build relationships in the hallway. And I'm going to challenge every staff person to ask a student their name, and then call them by their name later, right? So, "Hey, I haven't seen you before. What's your name?" "Oh, it's good to see you, Joe. So happy to have you here." And if we ask every staff member to maybe engage 2 students 3 times a week, Okay. Then every staff member has made 6 new connections. You have a whole building of staff members doing that. You're already really starting to see change. And that's easy enough, right? It barely takes any time. You'll see the next few are compliments, just we can make this whatever we want. But maybe week 2, I'm going to say, compliment a student's shoes, or, compliment 3 students' shoes. Important to note that when we're complimenting students, we want to make sure it's sincere and not backhanded. Hey, I love your sweatshirt. I'd like it better if the hood were down. It's not helpful. Eye contact, just to say, hey, I'm going to make eye contact and smile with 5 students this week. And even if they're like, oh, Mr. Krieger, what are you doing? They might kind of brush it off, but you're making that connection. It matters. It's important. A point and thumbs up is a good one. Having a joke of the day, and whether it's before every class or you just have it on your board in the morning. Dad jokes are a big hit for this. I heard one, I sent this one to some people the other day. It took a while to get, but I think it's funny. You say like, hey, who's in favor of bringing Roman numerals back in use? Well, I, for one, because yeah. Anyway, it's a terrible joke, but it made me laugh. And, and I think kids love that kind of stuff. So just having a joke of the day, get people laughing. Laughing is incredibly important to relationship building and connection and trust and all of that. Let them see your silly dad joke side. And then marker board is the other one he suggests. And that's just writing something on a marker board and holding it up. Today's going to be a great day. Or, hey, go Millers, whatever it might be, that is just going to give some encouragement. They're going to look and they're going to see you, notice you, see them engaging. And then celebrate the big wins, celebrate the little wins, have fun, right? I can't think of anything more connecting and relationship building than just having a good time together, and offering that space for celebration in a safe way. So the very last thing I'm just going to kind of quickly go over before we head out of here is collaborative communication. So we're doing all this fun stuff. We're setting up celebration and laughter, and we're talking about our values, but we want to make sure, and Bill mentioned this earlier, that we are offering choice, that we are going back and forth with our students in a way that is engaging them, but also empowering them to set their own goals, to make their own progress. And so motivational interviewing is a fantastic strategy for that. It is a therapeutic strategy, which sometimes causes, I've had people say to me before, that sounds like therapy talk. Well, it kind of is, but it works. So just collaborative goal setting. So when we can work together to help our students create a goal. So one way to do that might be, if we have a student who has a challenge with something, just say, how would you like for things to be different? Okay, so we're focusing on that individual, developing their intrinsic motivation. What do you want to see be different? All right. So now they're internally motivated, hopefully, and we can set that goal together. Because we know an outside force, direct persuasion, that does not work, right? And if it does work for the short term, it does not work for the long term. So focusing on that partnership, how can I help you? How can we work together? Like Dr. Lori says, how may I serve you? All these kinds of things, this collaboration is going to create safety, trust, connection. Utilize scales when you're asking about change talk. So, hey, you haven't been bringing your homework in. That's a bad example. Like, I used to use flossing teeth as an example in an activity. Just like hey, okay, how motivated are you to start flossing your teeth? Like, you don't do it on a scale of 1 to 10. How motivated are you to want to change? And people will say like a 2. It's not that important to me. Okay, well, how can I get you to a 3? Right? So we're not trying to motivate people from doing nothing to doing it all. Just like, how can I get you a little more excited about this? What can we do? Okay, so these small gains, and that's recognizing that change talk too. What would you like to look different? How can I just bump you up from 2 to 3? That kind of thing. So there we go. And then the last thing is just in our communication, utilizing ORs, which is open-ended questions. I think we've all fallen into the trap of yes, no questions before, right? Where you ask a question, the only options are yes or no, and then that's all you get, right? There's happens to me all the time. So asking open-ended questions, affirmations, just affirming what you hear, So I hear you saying you would like to have a good grade, but you don't want to do homework or whatever it might be, right? And that's part of reflective listening as well. And just summarizing what you hear. So you're just saying back to them what they say. Oop, there goes my timer. And we're good. We're right on time. Okay. And then, of course, and this is the foundation of all of it too, right? Non-judgmental, non-confrontational, and non-adversarial. So we aren't trying to have a power struggle. And we need to check in with ourselves, with our brain state before we engage with our students. We can be warm and firm. We can be that warm demander. But when there's a power struggle, we want to get to a place of felt safety before we engage. Yep. And then just a way, just a tool to use to help that when there is a conflict between a student and an adult. And you have this in your resources. Again, it's from Dr. Jessica and Indiana School Mental Health Initiative, but this dual brain sheet. So this is something that you can each sit down and do separately and then come together and do together if that works for you. But it's important to remember not to debrief until everybody's feeling calm. And sometimes that takes longer than we want it to, but it's an important step to positive change. All right. Do we have any questions? That was a lot of information really fast. So I'm going to give you my, especially for those of you who are watching this later, T. Krieger at encompassingeducation.com. I love to get emails from people. I really do. The follow-up emails bring me great joy. So feel free to send me an email if you have questions, if complaints, concerns, whatever. But yeah, I think that's.
Thank you, Tiffany. Thank you. Thank you. This was great information. I'm just going to close the session with these next few slides. You do see the resources here that are linked in. If anybody has any problems, you should be able to access those. If you have any problems, please let me know, of course. But everything that was shared, I think all of the resources shared throughout are linked here. So quick, easy way to access those. And then again, thank you for joining us today. Just a few quick things. I did just link the session evaluation. It's also a request form for PGPs, or if you're an active member of INSWA, you can also request CEUs through that same link. So just complete that evaluation to request any of those. Obviously, what the responses to the evaluation are helpful to us as we plan future professional learning. So we appreciate you taking the time to just answer a few quick questions there. Do want to share some upcoming events. Here's a kind of a snapshot of what we'll be offering this school year. I am very excited to share that we'll be offering 3 year-long, more intensive series or more intensive professional learning. You'll see we're offering school counselors for MTSS. This will be a hybrid. It will be both in-person and virtual learning, along with a book study for district and school teams. Really excited about this. Dr. Emily Goodman-Scott and her team of presenters will be actually the ones leading this series. So check it out, look at the website for more information, and of course, register if you're interested. The next intensive series will be Restorative Practices Readiness for School Leaders. This will be an all virtual series led by Allie Hearn. We had her present for us a couple of times last year, so you may be familiar with her. Really excited about this series as well. And then finally, Comprehensive School Counseling series. The registration for this one has not yet been posted, but it will be coming soon. So kind of just bookmark this and stay tuned for more information on this. And then finally, of course, we will be offering, as we have done in last year, monthly virtual free professional development, kind of like this one that we had today. And the topics will be aligned to those priority topics that were determined by you through our annual needs assessment. So be sure to subscribe to the monthly Counselor Connect newsletter to kind of stay up to date and to receive, updates on new events and sessions that are happening over the course of the year. For future live and on-demand Counselor Connect and Keep Indiana Learning sessions, visit keepindianalearning.org and you'll be able to access all of those there. Finally, wanted to share just contact information. Here on this slide, you'll find information for the Counselor Connect team, social media channels, and then of course that link to subscribe to the monthly newsletter. Please reach out to me if you have any questions or if you want to move from being a viewing participant to a member of one of our tactic teams or a paid content contributor. With that, thank you again for joining us. And I hope your school year starts really well and hope to see you soon. Thank you.